welcome to a MarketingSherpa webinar, How to Overcome the 5 Most Common Social Media Mistakes in B2B Marketing. This webinar is provided free courtesy of a sponsorship by Marketo. So first thing I want to do is thank Marketo, and I also want to tell you who's joining us on the line today. My name is Daniel Burstein. I'm the Director of Editorial Content here at MechLabs. With me is Nicole Kelly, the President of SME Digital. Nicole, how's everything doing at SME Digital these days?
It's going excellent. We have been working with clients on how they can integrate social into their digital marketing campaigns, and it's exciting.
Excellent. And Eddie Smith, the Chief Revenue Officer of Topsy Labs, calling us out of San Francisco. How are things at Topsy, Eddie?
Hey, Daniel. We're doing great. We're a software technology company, and we ingest all of the tweets coming out of Twitter via their fire hose and provide both search as well as analytic results for everything from marketing functions to product research, variety of different measurements to different disciplines.
Thanks, Eddie. Speaking of Twitter, we can hear from you on #Sherpa Webinar on Twitter. It's a great way for us to be able to answer your questions, for you to answer each other's questions, for you to network, and for you to give us some advice about what has been working for you in B2B social media. You can, of course, also use your chat function in ReadyTalk. On the left there, we have Andre and April in Denver on the line from ReadyTalk. They're here to answer any of your ReadyTalk specific questions. I've also got John and Amy and Will in the office here with me in Jacksonville Beach at MechLabs to answer any other questions you might have. So I highly, if you haven't been on a MarketingSherpa webinar before, we try to make it very interactive. We try to answer as many of your questions as possible. I'm not going to put Nicole on the spot and ask her how much she charges for an hour of consulting, but this is a great opportunity to get your money's worth and get your questions answered. We'll try to answer as many of them as possible. But this Sherpa webinar is going to be a little bit different because we're also going to be analyzing the tweets coming in through #Sherpa Webinar thanks to Topsy. So you want to tell us what we're looking at the screen here, Eddie? This is from some previous #Sherpa Webinar chats.
Yeah, absolutely, Daniel. So a lot of times what people are trying to answer from the Twitter sphere is kind of how much impression activity actually occurred. And what we are able to do is we actually calculate what's known as gross impressions or gross exposure metrics. So for the #Sherpa Webinar, over the past 30 days, what you're seeing here is the gross exposure or gross impressions for that hashtag over a 30-day period, day by day. And it's a highly effective way just to be able to use Twitter to actually measure, well, gross exposure.
Excellent. And another thing you were able to show us was, I think, some of the experts that have been tweeting on there. And I noticed myself on there, so I'm very happy about that.
That's right. And one of the unique things about social media is you're able to actually identify who's creating attention or who are the influential people for specific terms, keywords, links, and so forth. And so what you're seeing here is an analysis of who we saw as the top 7 people, again, over the past 30 days for the #Sherpa Webinar. And you can see Russell there, Michael, MarketingSherpa, your own domain name, and then yourself. And these are the people that are actually creating attention or content that other people are retweeting or direct actioning. And it's a really effective way to actually understand who's, well, creating attention for your own brand.
Thanks, Eddie. So start tweeting through #Sherpa Webinar, and hopefully at the end of this webinar, Eddie might be able to give us a little bit of insights into you. Tell you a little bit about MechLabs and MarketingSherpa if you're not familiar with us. Basically, we do a lot of research into what really works in marketing. We do that with our benchmark reports and surveys. We do that by having a team of reporters interview your peers for case studies about what really works. And let me start with our first question. I can kind of show you what we do. Bert asks, what is the most effective lead generation tactic for a manufacturing company? So we're not going to get into every specific lead generation tactic right now on this line, but we are going to talk about B2B social media as a lead generation tactic. And in our 2012 B2B marketing benchmark report, we found that the allocations of budgets for social media was squarely in the middle of the pack. And for the manufactured and packaged goods industry specifically, Bert, it was towards the bottom. So if you tune in to this webinar today, you might be able to learn some tactics that your competition hasn't adopted yet and get ahead of the pack, especially if you're in manufacturing. But first, we also want to ask you, launch a poll here and find out what you want to hear from us today. Which of the 5 social media mistakes would you like to hear most about? Can you launch that poll for me, John? And so what we're going to talk about is thinking your CFO is your nemesis, essentially talking about the types of metrics you should talk about to your business leaders. Single-use content. Is that really the best use of your content, just using it once? How to create content that is really authentic with your audience, because creating unauthenticated content, creating content that people don't trust, is not going to work on social media either. Some marketers treat social media as special, different than any other marketing tactic. That's not such a good idea either. And lastly, the marketers make the mistake of not soliciting outside content. They're not going to their audience. They're not looking at third-party content generators and seeing how they can use that content. So with that, let's see. We'll just skip to the results here. Let's take a look at what you guys are interested in. So single-use content, that's, it keeps jumping back and forth while I'm looking at it, but not soliciting outside content, single-use content, really everything, I would say. You guys are interested in all of it. That's good. So let's jump right into it then. I think a great way to start is with one of the first questions we had. It ties right into thinking your CFO is your nemesis, and Natalie asks, what measures of success should social media monitor? So we're going to talk about that. Let's look at a little bit of research from MarketingSherpa. When we asked CMOs about what was most important to them in social media, what were their goals that they were trying to achieve, only 46% viewed achieving or increasing a measurable ROI from social marketing programs as a top strategic priority. That's kind of surprising when you think about it. Sure, social media is new, but in the end, that's what we're in business for, is to affect the bottom line, is to improve that ROI. So 71% of CMOs told us they're trying to increase website traffic through social media integration, but you have to really ask, if you're only doing that, are you really affecting the bottom line? So with that, I want to turn it over to Eddie so he could tell us about some of what they're learning at Topsy about how to deal with the CFO and show some proof of social media's impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, so we all know that CFOs like to count things in a lot of different ways. And so one of the things that you can count very precisely is just the number of times somebody's actually mentioned a keyword or term in tweets over time. What you're seeing on the screen right now is an analysis of number of mentions of IBM, Cisco, Hewlett Packard over the past 90 days. And what's interesting about this chart is the blue line is for IBM. You can see, 90 days ago it had a relatively higher amount of volume. And you also note that you see weekly ups and downs, and this is probably an indication of just how people are actually talking about B2B brands. During the week, Monday through Friday, people are at work, they're talking about it more, versus on the weekend, you're seeing people relax, hopefully chill out, and not talk about things more. But from a CFO's perspective, especially, what's really important is being able just to have baseline measurements, right? Because when you're running a campaign now, let's say you're Cisco, and you're looking at your baseline here, looking at the chart, you can see you've got an average, looks like about just under 5K or so average baseline, and so you can use historical baselines to then justify how well or how not well the current campaign ran. The other interesting aspect of social media is you can measure not just for yourself, but also for your competitors. And those provide, again, excellent baseline referential metrics to understand how well or how not well you're doing. And again, you can parse all of these data out from the full Twitter fire hose in real time or for extensive historical periods. The other thing that folks want to do, especially in terms of driving leads and traffic into their website, is to be able to track the number of times people actually mention links in tweets to their domains. And in this analysis, we kind of stepped away from just the keyword analysis, and we looked at the amount of traffic that was actually being referenced, resolving back to SAP.com's domain, Oracle.com domain, and then the Salesforce.com domain. And so looking at social media measurements, especially from Twitter, not just from a number of mention perspective around keywords, but also looking at social media and tweets in particular as a way to drive traffic back to your domain, and then to be able to measure that. And then once the traffic comes to your domain, clearly you can then rely upon your own on-site measurement techniques to measure click-through rates, conversion rates, and so forth. But again, the other aspect here is competitively you can also measure not just how well you're doing, but also how well your competitors are doing, and then use these measurements as baselines for justification on a go-forward basis to your CFO to increase your spend within social media.
That is one great thing about social media, isn't it, Eddie, that it's a public conversation, so it's all there. You can learn about the conversations your customers are having, and you can also learn about the conversations they're having about your competitors.
That's exactly right, Daniel. And it's a different way of thinking about measurements and analytics, right? I mean, traditional web metrics, you're kind of constrained by just what you see on your domain, right? Because that's where your tags are. They're collecting impression, click-through, and conversion rate metrics. With social media, you don't have tags in tweets or whatever the communication vehicle is. But what you're able to actually parse out of conversations are reference points, not just to your own brands and products, but also to your competitors' brands and products. And these provide excellent reference points for understanding how well you're doing, or to understand how well your competitors are doing and then benchmark off of their own measurements.
Excellent. So we have a question here from Megan Kelly about the best way to create quality leads with social. And Nicole Kelly, I don't know if you guys are any relation, but she's about to, in just a moment, give us a great case study to show how to generate some quality leads. But first, Nicole has also provided us with great cat analogies for each and every one of these social media mistakes we're talking about. So Nicole, walk us through this first cat analogy, please.
Absolutely. So, I think the first question is, why do we think CFOs are our nemesis? And I think the reason that we get into that position is because CFOs ask tough questions. They really want to understand how what you're doing relates to the bottom line, because their job as the chief financial officer is to make sure that the bottom line is protected. And the reason that this becomes a challenge in social media is that a lot of the metrics that we're presenting are really kind of fluffy metrics. We're talking about, how many followers we have, how many fans we have, volume of conversation, and those are important to us as community managers because we want to understand if we're driving that needle. But when you start talking to the CFO and you start asking for more money or more budget, as I always say, the CFO has money bags, and we want our little piece of that money so that we can do the campaigns that we want. It's important to correlate that conversation into how it impacts the bottom line. And we do that by connecting social media to metrics that are important to the business and business objectives like sales volume, revenue, costs. The big question is, okay, we had this great spike in conversation. What did that do in terms of revenue for the organization? And when you can start answering questions like that and start to align yourself with the CFO to understand what they actually want, then you start to really see an improvement in not only your own credibility, but also in the types of budget allocations you're getting for your social media initiatives. And I have a nice little case study here on RS Components, which is an equipment manufacturer, an electronics manufacturer. And basically they, any kind of computer equipment you have, you are definitely using some kind of an RS component. And so one of the things that they wanted to figure out is that they actually put out a print publication. And this publication is expensive to print, it's expensive to ship out. And they wanted to find out, now that the audience is starting to move into this digital spectrum, can they actually drive an online subscription to this publication that would be much more costly to deliver and would take, they wouldn't have the shipping cost, the printing cost, etc. So what they did is they did an iPad campaign that was specifically geared towards getting people to download the app for this publication. And what they found is that, they had a 289% increase in total impressions, which is, I would argue that impressions are a little bit of a fluffy metric, but they tell us top-line impact in terms of how many people are actually seeing what we're doing. But most importantly, they started to see an increase in engagement. So they had a 169% increase in engagement, and those are people who are taking physical action to actually interact with their brand, which is important, because if people are engaging with us, then we know that we're doing something meaningful for them. But at the bottom line, what that CFO is going to care about is that they had a 1,453% increase in leads generated, while decreasing the cost per lead 44%. Those are things that your CFO can understand. There is a benchmark for success of what they expect a lead to cost, and that they understand all of those metrics, and it matters to them. It's something that is directly impacting the bottom line. And so that's why I like this case study around RS Components, because it's a great B2B story about how they were able to actually decrease costs in the organization while generating leads.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Let's move on to our next social media mistake, single-use content. So if we take a look at research from the 2011 B2B Marketing Benchmark Report from MarketingSherpa, we look at repurposing and reformatting existing content is the most effective tactic for developing B2B marketing content. So when you think about that, think of all the content you're already producing and how you can use it in other ways. So for example, you're writing up a white paper, can you also turn that into a webinar? Can you turn that into a blog post? Can you tweet out that blog post? Can you like those blog posts on Facebook? Again, you can get much more mileage out of your content if you don't make this mistake. And to explain it to us, there's this cat onion. Nicole, please tell me more about this.
I like to use this image because it has it gives you the full perspective of multiple layers, right? And so content also has multiple layers. And if you have a really, really good topic, then you need to look at how you can repurpose that topic. Can it be an email? Is it a blog post? Can you also turn it into some kind of an ebook or a piece of downloadable content? And so when we look at content, we try to develop these really, really great topics that have multiple layers to them so we can repurpose it. Because as we know, content creation is one of the biggest challenges for marketers today. We don't have a lot of time, and so we don't want to do these one-off posts all of the time. We need to find a way to leverage it over multiple channels. And so if you have a really great topic, start thinking about, what else could that be? Can we support it with a blog post? Can we turn it into a webinar? How can we generate leads from this topic and make it something that we can actually require people to fill out a form to get? And so by repurposing that content, number one, it makes it a lot easier for the team to actually produce and support that content. And number two, it tends to be more efficient from a productivity standpoint in terms of your content calendar. And to give you an example of this, I actually have a little case study on Bolero, who is a live chat software company. And basically, what we did with them is we took this topic about customer service, right? And so their goal is to help companies provide better customer service through their technology. And we did a blog post, we did an ebook, and then we also supported it with a webinar. And we did this over a 30-day campaign and had direct calls to action and all of the different pieces to generate leads for the company. And what was interesting is that by combining this and spreading this topic out over multiple pieces, we saw that it generated a 74% lift in online leads for the month, which was huge for the company. And so, the goal is I have a topic. How do I spread that out across multiple pieces of content?
All right, thank you, Nicole. And for those asking about the lead gen information I talked about, the lead gen budget chart that I talked about at the top of this webinar, I've tweeted that link to #Sherpa Webinar, and you can learn more about that. Another social media mistake is creating content that is not authentic. And that ties very nicely into a question we have here from Brittany, which I'm going to give my 2 cents on. Nicole and Eddie, feel free to jump in too if you have any thoughts. So Brittany asks, we're just beginning to dive into social media here at the credit union. Once our pages are up and running, what do we start with? What are the best ways to generate buzz online and get members to communicate with us online? And I think this question is a perfect example of why we need to create authentic content. So, anytime you're generating content, you have to think about the value proposition for that content and the value proposition for your company within the industry. And credit unions are a perfect example because the financial industry, a lot of banks are very undifferentiated from each other and they try to have some different branding, but basically, find our locations everywhere. But credit unions have that really distinct value proposition that they're owned by the members and that they serve the members. And if you can't tell, I'm a member of a credit union, so I'm very excited about it. And so I think a great way to get going on that and to start getting your members and getting everyone involved is to create authentic content about the solutions you're really offering for them and how you're really making their lives better. So great ways to do that are reach out to some of your customers that you know have had success, either in getting a mortgage or getting a loan, or in some way how your service has impacted them and made a difference, and create a mini case study around that. And it doesn't have to be like an official formal case study like the ones that we're talking about online, but just something that you can communicate through your blog, through your Facebook page, through any other medium, a YouTube video, or what else you can do. And then also from that, then solicit your audience to tell you more about how you're helping them and how you can help them and interact with them by answering questions on there, or also by offering some sort of incentive, like having a little contest. So, for example, if your goal is to serve your community, you can have some sort of public service, contest in your community about, what local nonprofit do you think is best, or something like that. But again, it comes down to what we're about to talk about, creating content that's really authentic to what you offer to your customers every day. In social media, that's content that you're going to be distributing free, and then your service, obviously, is how you get paid for that. So I just wondered if Nicole or Eddie, if you had anything else to chime in with about getting started social media with a credit union.
Absolutely, and I have a large background in the financial industry, so this is one that's near and dear to my heart. So basically what I would recommend is that you take a look at the bigger conversation around finance and what is the relationship that your customer base has with money. Are they, financial experts themselves? Or are they, and they really, really feel like they know what they're talking about? Or do they have an uncomfortable relationship with finance in that, they don't necessarily like to talk about, their money. They don't necessarily engage online about finance a lot. And if you find that, then what you can start to do is you can start to say, okay, well, if I know the global feeling about how their relationship is with money, then we can start to provide tips to help change that and to spur the conversation around how our products or services can actually help them versus talking about your products and services all of the time. So for example, if you look at Mint, which is a great website for managing multiple bank accounts online, one of the things that they do is that they're actually aggregating all of that data so you can see a holistic picture. And when they're actually talking about the stuff that they do, they're talking more about why it's important to look at the holistic picture of your finances than the actual service that they provide. So that's one thing I would definitely take a look at.
Yeah, and I think the credit unions have such a great local spin to their services, right? So to your point, Nicole, don't pitch your products and services, but think about your own customers' problems and then create content that provides answers and solutions to those problems. I would think, generally that for a credit union's perspective, tying that into some local event, some local issues to really make the content resonate with the local consumers and your constituents would be highly effective.
Excellent. And all that what Nicole and Eddie and me are talking about, it comes down to content generation. It comes down to showing how you can actually serve your customers and really knowing about your customers. And what we learned in the 2012 Inbound Marketing Handbook is that content creation improves lead quality and conversion rate. Well, you can see in this chart, this is specific to SEO, which when you think of your overall inbound plan, SEO should be aligned with social media. All of that content you're generating, whether it's through a social media channel, whether it's through your website, it should all be integrated in a fashion that brings customers to your site and gets them to convert. And those customers, those marketers that actually use content, are actually generating authentic content, are having, as you can see here, they're having better conversion rates and they're getting more traffic from organic sites such as Google, which should not be surprising. So I'm going to tweet through the hashtag Sherpa Webinar a free excerpt of our Inbound Marketing Handbook if you're interested in more data there. But Eddie, we had a question here about what is meant by authentic content. So you want to give us a lowdown on it?
Yeah, definitely. I think authenticity kind of has at least two dimensions, right? One is the actual content you're creating, and then the other, which is especially important in social media, is who's the perceived source, right? And in social media, as with kind of the real life, we have relationships with different people that we perceive as being the experts in certain areas, topics that we're working with. And so in Twitter or in Facebook, right, we look to different people as the kind of experts for different topics. In some instances, you've got commercial organizations, or in this case, political organizations, who actually take advantage of that whole construct of who's perceived as the authentic expert source. What you're looking at here is, I don't know if you guys remember this, this was a few months ago where the firm Anonymous actually spoofed Nick Bilton, who's a reporter for the Times, and what they actually did was they created a false page, under the pretenses of communicating. Basically, it was false information, and then what they did is they created a false Nick Bilton account, just slightly modifying the wording on the account, and then directed a link in the tweet back to the page that they had created. And the whole notion here was that people perceive, well, Nick from the Times as being highly authentic and an expert, and if he's communicating something, well, that's going to have much higher credibility than if not. And what actually happened was that tweet got picked up and retweeted a lot. And you can see the kind of thread from a Twitter perspective here. People picked up on it, identified that it was a really clever kind of spoofy hack. But it's a great example of somebody actually not taking over an account, but spoofing an account by creating something that was similar, and then kind of hijacking that person's persona to create credibility around their story. So the lessons from this are, A, just at a personal level, when you're looking at content within Twitter, Facebook, whatever the source is, make sure that you're indeed reading, communicating, retweeting content that's from the original source. B, you actually want to create an authentic source around your own brand. And again, a lot of that goes back to kind of the basics of creating content that matters, content that's relevant to your constituents, and then getting those individuals to retweet, post up, talk about your content so that over time you're able to actually build up your follower list and be perceived as the credible kind of voice of knowledge for the areas of interest that run your business, and then to leverage that to drive leads.
Excellent. And Nicole, you think of this in a different way. You think of this kind of as cats hiding in mouse outfits, huh?
I do. So I think as a company, it's really about understanding what your company represents and what the personality of your brand is, and making sure that that comes through on social media content. So I've seen everything from companies try to have like a humorous approach when they really aren't funny people, to trying to be really, really corporate when the company's personality is something totally different. So I think it's just really important that you understand who your company is, you understand the voice that's really that really resonates, because that's the voice that you're going to naturally kind of going to go to. And so if you understand that and you're always speaking with an authentic voice in social, then your audience is going to appreciate that a little bit more. But it is also important that your authentic voice for the company aligns with the authentic voice of the audience, and understanding and being able to speak to both of those, I think, is really important.
So another element to creating authentic content is also to communicating with your audience in social media channels that they naturally use. So to give you an example, if you're a marketer and if you're targeting my mom and you think you're going to be able to reach her through Twitter, that's not going to work so well. She thinks it's called the twiddle and she doesn't know how it works. So it's also very important to understand where your customers are, how they naturally interact. So along those lines, I want to ask you, Nicole, and you, Eddie, we have a question here from Heather. How do you know where your audience is? If they aren't on Twitter, should we abandon the site in favor of forums, etc.? So Nicole, we were talking about this earlier. What are your thoughts?
So we actually do studies like this to try to figure out where the conversation is, and I think there's a big misconception that everybody's audience is on Twitter and everybody's audience is on Facebook, and you see everybody talking about these sexy strategies for getting customers on Facebook and Twitter, or spurring conversation. What we actually find, though, that's really interesting is that every industry that we've taken a look at to find where the conversations are happening, anywhere from 40 to 70% of those conversations are actually happening on blogs and forums. And forums like, those old circa 1996 message boards, there's a lot of people still using those. So I think first of all, you do have to find where your audience is. And while it may not be sexy to have a blog and forum outreach strategy and how to participate in those conversations, if that's where your audience is, that's absolutely where your company should be. And if your audience isn't on Twitter, you're really just kind of talking to crickets there. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time on Twitter if your audience isn't there.
Did you have any other thoughts, Eddie?
I take a more kind of quantitative measurement approach to it, and I think my perspective would be take a look at your own on-site web analytics, and specifically look at where your referring traffic's coming from. And let those measurements lead your nose in terms of what other social networks or blogs, forums people are actually coming in from. And if you do that effectively, the traffic that you're seeing coming in from some of the microsites, blogs, other social networks outside of Twitter and Facebook is going to be relatively small. But I think that's a highly effective way just to start to kind of wrap your hands around and quantify what other social media people who actually are your customers or visitors to your site at least are actually utilizing and talking about, and then figuring out how to embed your own messages into those posts and forums to influence that audience and to get them to talk more positively about your own brands, your own products, and your own services.
We have another question here for you, Eddie, from Sue. She wants to know how pervasive non-credible tweeting and not authentic content, not credible content, how pervasive that is. And I'd like to hear your thoughts in a minute, Eddie, but I can say when you think about some of the sites that you come across, I don't want to mislabel any industry, but some with the affiliate industry and how they try to just glom on to any SEO they can get. There's a lot of content out there that was produced very poorly, sometimes by very cheap, very foreign writers that you come across. Google has been doing a lot of work to improve this with their, some of their updates, but a lot of people come across as very non-credible content. So while your content might be credible, you almost have to go above and beyond to make sure that's clear, because as the saying goes, and as you can see here with some of Nicole's pictures, no one knows you're a cat online, or no one knows who you are. No one knows what's behind your content, really. And so while you might think it's not a big deal to have authentic content, it's not a big deal to be credible, I know what I'm writing, I know the people behind it, you have to make that very evident to your audience. That's why it's great highlighting customers. It's great highlighting the people that are actually blogging, that are actually writing and tweeting, showing that real people are behind it. It's great having conversations with your community, because then you show there's real people behind it really trying to serve an audience. It's not some, who knows, it could be some site in some other country that's phishing or that's trying to do some other thing. But those are my 2 cents. I want to hear what you thought about that, Eddie.
I think it's all pervasive. Right? It started, well, many, many years ago, to your point, around SEO and people, creating not just one site, but literally thousands of sites to game Google's PageRank system, with various content strategies and linking strategies. That whole, I'm going to call it spammer mentality, has moved into the social realm. Twitter itself, they've got, 400 million tweets per day. There is a ton of, I'm just going to call them spammers, right? People that create tweets that are 100% just commercial intent. And, I think consumers, for the most part, recognize that. And I think, consumers are hungry for, real information, right? A lot of it is perception. A lot of it is also perceived in terms of who it's coming from. But if you can start to build credibility and relationships with your customers, with your prospects in social media by providing, step 1 with valuable content, step 2 then building relationships, getting people to follow you, to friend you, and to have that trust built over time, I think that's invaluable. And it cuts through all the noise. And in social media there is a ton of noise, and most of that noise is propagated by a lot of the commercial entities out there. So very, very pervasive from a commercial perspective.
I just want to add something here, that there's another type of content that's not authentic. And really, if the only thing you do is talk about yourself on your social media channels, it's really not authentic content. It's self-serving and promotional, and it's not actually adding value to the audience. And I think when you try to look like you're adding value to the audience and that you're actually helping someone, but at the end of the day you're just really trying to pitch your services, that's a whole nother way of being inauthentic in social channels that really, really hurts the core relationship with your customer and prospect base. And I think it's really important that people are starting to realize that you have to earn the right to talk about yourself in social media channels. While we may think that because this is our brand's Twitter account or our brand's Facebook page that we can say whatever we want and that we can talk about ourselves as much as we want, the reality of the situation is if you want to engage your audience, you really need to earn the right to talk about yourself. And you earn the right to talk about yourself by sharing other people's content at least 80% of the time. At least that's a general rule I use. I use an 80-20 rule, that we have to share third-party, really good, hyper-relevant third-party content 80% of the time, and that earns us the right to talk about ourselves 20% of the time.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Nicole, and I think that really ties into how you can differentiate yourself from not just the outright spammers, but also those who aren't really engaged in true social media and content marketing. And just one final thought, I tweeted this through the hashtag Sherpa Webinar. We did a little study, 60-day study on the MarketingSherpa blog, and we found, for example, the electrical industry, there were a little over 140,000 tweets on this specific topic in the electrical industry. And by applying a very basic folder, we saw about 130,000 of those posts were just outright spam. You can go to the link I tweeted through hashtag Sherpa Webinar if you'd like to learn more about that. Let's jump ahead now. Let's talk about another mistake, treating social media like it's special. And so what we're talking about here is that social media should not be on an island. Even though it could be the new kid on the block, let it come and play with all of your other, let it integrate with all of your other marketing practices. So in the 2012 Inbound Marketing Handbook of MarketingSherpa, we found that most marketers agree on the importance of inbound marketing integration, but they're just not doing it. So you see on the left, 76% say, yeah, it makes sense to integrate inbound marketing tactics, right, like we talked about SEO with social media, for example, but only 47% say they actually do this. And keep in mind, this is just inbound tactics. This doesn't include integrating social media with your email or integrating it with your marketing department as a whole. And so we're going to get into some of this, but then in the end we're going to answer this question from Amelia. I'm going to ask you, Nicole, and you, Eddie, because it kind of gets into how to integrate social media into your marketing department. She wants to know, how do you navigate the approval process? I guess for her, there's a multi-week static content standard process, and that just doesn't work for real-time social media. So I'll tell you, I've experienced this too. I traditionally came from the print advertising background. I worked for an ad agency. We did a lot of print. It's really exciting. We do the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. That was the big thing. Obviously now that's going down a little. And what we were able to experience is we had several weeks lead time, and then you'd produce one thing and it would be over. But social media is just a never-ending process. You have to quickly act on topics to be up on the real-time conversations going on, and then you have to continuously follow up and follow up and follow up on those conversations. So Nicole and Eddie, what have you experienced in how to get a social media approval process to work within a traditional marketing department? How do you make that work?
Nicole, you want me to go?
I would say that this really comes down to putting the right framework in place. So I like to look at it in terms of really talking through some of the issues of what you're actually going to what's going to happen in social. So number one, how do we handle complaints? What's an appropriate response to a complaint? How do we decide how to escalate it? When we're publishing content, what is the guide rail that we need to stay within so that legal is happy, compliance is happy, HR is happy, and understanding that on the front end so that there's a general understanding that as long as we stay within these parameters, then we don't need this heavy approval process. But the minute that we step outside of it, we probably do need that approval process, but it's for a good reason. It's not because somebody wants to see every status update that we're doing. It's because there actually is a legal issue behind it. So if you develop policies that actually start to put that framework in place and give it really good, solid examples of what the company actually wants to happen in response to something and what the tone is and all that fun stuff, then it makes people a lot more comfortable. But you have to improve that, all of those executive members that have a vested interest in that approval process or in the creation of those policies so they feel comfortable downstream.
Yeah, one of the in the financial services industry in particular, banks in particular, they've got, well, let's just call it very elongated approval processes for any type of content that goes out to consumers. And just structurally and organizationally to put in place systems that kind of facilitate anywhere near real-time communication back to consumers in social media is extraordinarily challenging to get done in those types of organizations. I mean, it's a very complicated problem set. You're not just dealing with marketing department, you're dealing with compliance department, you're dealing with regulatory issues and legal approvals as well. One of the things that I do see those types of organizations doing, however, is creating events, meaning they're creating things that they can plan for out into the future, whether it is a webinar, whether it is a sporting event, whether it is any type of something that you can actually plan for. And then you're actually leveraging that event to drive the social communication. And so it's a kind of a roundabout way of you're not actually producing content in real time to address the needs as they arrive, but you're actually creating conversations and volumes of people talking about your brand and your products around planned events. And that's what I see organizations that have highly structured approval processes doing to try to actually get ahead of the communication curve.
All right, excellent, Eddie. Let's jump into more about treating social media like it's special. You've said that even on Twitter, a lot of marketers are making a mistake by not including links.
Yeah, so this is a screenshot of my own account, and what I highly encourage all of our customers to do is always, when you're tweeting, try to embed links. Right, so you're creating content, and when you are communicating out, again, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a Facebook reply, whether it's a forum post, put links into your communication. Why? It actually makes the communication much more interesting because you can only fit so many characters within a 140 character space. But if somebody sees a link, it draws their attention. They actually will click on it. 2, it actually drives then traffic back to your website, so then you can entice them, assuming you're looking to generate leads, to actually click through further in your domain and to actually have a valid lead generated from that social communication post.
Okay. By the way, Sue said in response to answering her question, helpful, thanks. By the way, the cats are darling. And Nicole, this is my favorite cat, the emperor cat that I guess just doesn't play well with others. Is that what you're trying to say social media can be within the marketing department? Or?
Yeah, I think that we've kind of created this idea that social media is special and that it needs to be elevated on some platform, that it needs to be treated specially. We need to do special things with social. We need to measure social media separately. And I think that the challenge with that is that social media actually does play really well with others when you start to integrate it. And if we treat social media like it's so special, then what ends up happening is that people start to really dislike social media. It starts to get looked at differently in the organization. And I think most marketing teams, it's not like there's a whole social team in most companies that's sitting over there that the only thing and the only responsibility that they have is social media. And so we have a lot of other responsibilities. And if we start to look where social can be integrated into things like email marketing, into website marketing, content strategies on websites can greatly improve the number of leads, and the number of leads you're actually converting, not only from social but also from organic and PPC search as well. So when you start to integrate it, that's where you get the big wins with social media. But again, you can't, I see this all the time where people are measuring social media all by itself, and what ends up happening is, in the beginning when you start to measure social media ROI, first of all, it's always negative because we haven't been measuring and we haven't been optimizing for it. Second of all, as we start to look at this and we start to look for the early wins, many times social media is actually outperforming in some weird areas like conversion rates and the cost per lead, for example. But you don't understand that if you're not comparing it to other channels. Otherwise, it just kind of looks like, oh, well, social media generated 100 leads. Our other channels generate 100,000 leads. Well, yeah, we generated 100 leads, but those leads converted at 80%. How about we look at how we can scale that? So I think that, as marketers are out there and they're starting to look at social media, I think the hardest thing to do is try to do the special social media thing. But if you start with how do we integrate social into what we're already doing, it becomes a much more manageable task.
And Nicole, do you think the quality of those leads, because we had a question earlier about how to get quality leads through social media, do you think the quality of those leads also ties into the authenticity, the level of authenticity of the conversation like you were saying before?
Yeah, I think that the quality of the leads is, well, first of all, when you generate leads through social media, it's important to understand that it's different than other channels. So if you compare this to like pay-per-click advertising, right? When I'm searching for a solution to a problem, I'm more likely to convert in a shorter amount of time and, and some would argue at even a higher rate than a lead that comes through social. So if we try to say that the social lead is exactly the same as some of these other channels, I think we can get ourselves into some trouble. The reality with social is that when you're generating leads that have touched the social channel, and especially if they started in the social channel, we find that they actually are much earlier in the buying process, and we're getting to them before our competition. That doesn't mean that the lead is less valuable, but it does mean many times that that lead is going to take longer to convert, but they convert at a higher rate than some other marketing channels. So we need to understand where the social lead fits, and that they are earlier in the buying process. But at the same time, when you look at where you're comparing leads to in other channels, it's a symbiotic relationship. It's not like you have a social media lead that only touches social. A lot of times what we find is that social is great at starting the conversation and delivering that initial touch point that gets contact information, but at the end of the day, a lot of times they convert through traditional marketing, and that's another reason why it's important not to treat social like it's special, because at the end of the day, they're going to end up in your email campaigns that the company already has in place. So we need to optimize those campaigns to make sure that they actually will respond to that social lead. And in some cases, we need to treat them differently to make sure we have high funnel content, that if they downloaded for example, I downloaded an ebook and it doesn't have anything to do with your product or service, they need a different type of content than somebody who actually indicated product interest. But at the end of the day, the channels all are going to merge and combine.
All right, thanks, Nicole. In just a moment, we have this question here from Jeff about social short links versus full links. Eddie, I'm going to ask you about that, what you think of short links versus full links. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask Nicole this question from Brian. How do you find relevant content for businesses? And we will be finishing up our webinar by talking about mistake number 5. But first, I would be remiss if I did not thank the sponsor of this webinar, which is Marketo. They allow us to provide this information to you for free. And I noticed I've been seeing Marketo everywhere lately. I was reading the Wall Street Journal about a week or two ago, and right there on the front page, one of those cool woodcuts that the Wall Street Journal does of people, I see Phil Fernandez, the president of Marketo. I must fall on my chair. I thought that was great. I also saw the Wall Street Journal listed them as one of the top 50 startups. Inc. 500, I saw they were number 78 on that list, so they've been doing a lot of things lately. If you're not familiar with Marketo, Marketo provides easy and powerful marketing automation software with everything a marketer needs: email, social, analytics, lead management, and more. The software allows marketers to interact seamlessly with their customers across diverse channels and gives marketers data and analytic insights for understanding where and how to allocate their budgets for maximum return. Visit Marketo.com to see how companies large and small in every industry are experiencing success with marketing solutions from Marketo. So thank you again to Marketo for sponsoring this webinar. I also wanted to mention that, by the way, Nicole, Eddie, and I met at a MarketingSherpa Summit, and the next MarketingSherpa Summit we have coming up is MarketingSherpa Email Summit 2013. It will be here soon. After 10 years, Email Summit 2013 is still the largest vendor-neutral, research-based email marketing event. We have just announced our keynote speakers, and by the way, one of them, Jay Baer, is going to be talking about social media and how it integrates with email. The title, I believe, is something like Email is Madonna, Facebook is Lady Gaga. So just by that title, you can tell how entertaining of a speaker Jay Baer is. He cracks me up, but he also has some really, really helpful, actionable advice. You can check that URL out, MarketingSherpa.com/email summit. We've got a full slate of more than 30 sessions aimed at overcoming your top challenges. You get practical email marketing tactics, knowledge, expertise to help get ahead and stay ahead of the competition. Just so you know, until the end of this month, you can save $500 off your ticket. So reserve your seat today. I hope to see you all in beautiful Las Vegas. Now, let's jump back to those questions. Eddie, what are your thoughts? Short links versus full links?
I'd go shorten. I mean, especially if the communications in Twitter, right, you've got 140 characters, so go shortened. Leaves you more text to articulate, what actually is in the link. Also, shortened states. I mean, our own service, we unpack every single one. So just from a measurement analytics perspective, we actually track URLs, in their native state. So we just unpack everything. So I would use shorten, and it takes, a millisecond to have the consumer actually unpack stuff. So very low latency as well.
Okay, let me ask you, Nicole. Brian wanted to know, how do you find relative content for businesses?
So this is an interesting question. I think that, number one, interesting content is around whatever your industry is around and whatever kind of tips are relevant to your prospect and customer base. What I like to do is, it's pretty simple. We subscribe to a bunch of different blogs and websites, and we tie them into an RSS reader, and then we're basically looking at that content. It's content that we've already vetted, that posts content on a regular basis, and then we look at that to basically say, okay, well, what's interesting to the audience today? What's timely and relevant? There's also several tools that make this a lot easier for you, so definitely do some research into the content curation space, and there's a lot of tools out there that can really help you make it a very simple process as well.
So speaking of content curation, let's get into social media mistake number 5, not soliciting outside content. So just so you know, the rest of the webinar, we've had a chance to thank our sponsor. For the next few minutes, we just are focused on providing you value, and when we close out the webinar, we'll have a survey that will pop up. Help us learn how we can provide more value to you in future webinars. Give us your honest, unvarnished feedback of how we did, how it helped you, and what else you'd like to know about. But as we look at research from the MarketingSherpa 2012 Search Marketing SEO edition, we see at the very top for B2B marketers, customer reviews are the most effective content in meeting marketing objectives. So, Nicole, do you want to tell us a little bit about customer reviews and just soliciting outside content in general?
Absolutely. Well, we talked a little bit about the whole 80-20 rule, right? Well, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. Number one, it is about earning the right to talk about yourself. Number two, we don't have the bandwidth to create 100% of the content that we need to really engage our audience in social channels. So if we're not looking towards outside content, we're going to run our marketing teams into the ground because they just can't write enough blog posts, enough ebooks, enough webinars. They can't do enough of that. So third-party content is a really great way to round out all of the needs that you have in order to generate the audience and engagement that you're looking for. It also is, it's not only about sharing third-party content. You can also look for how you can partner with outside organizations to be able to attract the right audience. So I like to look at this in terms of how it aligns with public relations. So we have all of these targeted media outlets that we're trying to get to mention us and we're trying to get to cover us in stories. Why not partner with that media outlet and do some kind of a joint webinar that's promoted out to both organizations' lists that helps both organizations and get their expertise, actually have one of their editors on a panel. I think there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of not only content curation but also in content partnerships.
Okay, excellent. And Eddie, do you want to tell us about some of the data you were able to find?
Yeah, so social media can also be used beyond just kind of counting, mention activity and link activity back to your own domain. I'm sure most of the folks on the phone are concerned about how people are actually talking about and expressing themselves around their own brand and their own products. And one of the really useful ways that you can actually measure that in social media is through sentiment analysis. What you're looking at here is a 3-month trend of Hewlett-Packard by day, where we've taken our own sentiment score. It's a score of 0 to 100, kind of 50 is the midpoint. Above the line is positive, below the line is negative. And what we do is we actually analyze every single tweet that contains the keyword Hewlett-Packard. We score that tweet, and then we output overall sentiment by day for the conversations revolving around Hewlett-Packard. Again, it's a highly effective way to kind of quantify how people are expressing themselves about your own company, about your competitors' company, products, or services. And it's also a great way, going back to the first lesson of how do you justify marketing expenditures to your CFO, to kind of moving the dial, hopefully in a positive way, around how your marketing efforts are improving how people are actually communicating about your products and services in the marketplace.
Excellent. We've got a question here from Kevin. He asks, I work in the building products industry. Most companies who do leverage social media do it poorly. My management team is still not convinced social media is worth pursuing. What would you each recommend as the best way to get started in a low-risk, sure-win manner? So I'm going to ask Nicole and Eddie in a moment, but I want to call out this great example. If you're not familiar with Marcus Sheridan, he was actually a keynote speaker at our last Email Summit 2012, and he tells a story of, he was in the pool industry, so similar to the building products industry, perhaps Kevin, the pool industry, and he said most of his competitors were busy digging holes and filling it with water, right? And so he looked and he saw, what are others not doing? And he learned a little bit about social media and SEO, and what his approach was is take the 50 most commonly asked questions that you get from your customers every day and turn that into 50 blog posts. Turn that into your first 50 blog posts. And then he ended up doing more things, turning it into ebooks and all these other things. But by doing that, by doing kind of what Nicole was saying before, just helping your customers and answering the questions they have anyway, you just happen to be doing it in this format called social media. You're able to replicate what everyone in your organization does every day. If your sales team or your customer service team is commonly answering these questions, you're getting greater value about it by just putting it out there in a very honest way. And he turned huge profits from this, and he got a lot of inbound traffic from this, again, by just answering those questions that he would get anyway. It also helped his sales process, which was really interesting. He calls it assignment selling. What he would do is he would take these ebooks or some of this different information, and when a customer was interested, he would say, okay, here, read this information, because this is going to answer all your questions about pools, about what you might be interested in pools. And so when I come to your house, I'm not coming there to answer questions about pools or anything like that. It's already answered in our content. It's already been answered through these channels. I'm coming there to sell you a pool. And he had a much higher conversion rate and wasted much less time selling. But Eddie, what do you think? Best way to get started in social in a low-risk, sure-win manner?
Number one, I'd first ask the question, what are the KPIs, right? Is it conversion rate? Is it RPM? Is it revenue per form? Whatever the metric is, focus on that, number one, because that's how your management team is going to kind of normalize or think about success. And then second, I would go along the lines of the strategy that you were articulating, which is to understand your audience, create content that's going to engage that audience, whether it's a blog post, whether it's tweets referencing blog or content that you've created on your site, and then focusing on the measurements that you need to be able to demonstrate to your management team to articulate success. Case in point, simple one. If it's as simple as amount of traffic that's generated from Twitter or from Facebook or whatever it is, make sure that you're embedding links in that communication and then simply measure that communication over time. You can create this content organically. You don't have to buy media. It's all organic. You don't have to generate a huge amount of traffic to demonstrate success, and it should be pretty lightweight to actually execute.
Yeah, and I would say, I like to, with that question, I like to say take a step back from social media as the tool. Because at the end of the day, social media is a tool that helps companies achieve goals. So I would ask your executive team, what are they trying to accomplish? What are the business goals? Are they trying to increase revenue? Are they trying to increase profitability? Are they on a cost-cutting mission where they're really trying to decrease costs? And then figure out how social media really fits into the context of that. So if they're looking to increase revenue, then let's figure out how we can turn our website into a tool that actually generates a ton of leads. And we use blogs to help accomplish that, and we generate landing pages and all that fun stuff. Starting on-site and starting with a blog with comments enabled and start having conversations there and helping from an SEO perspective is a great way to start. Marcus is one of my favorite speakers. If you've never seen him speak, you need to, because he gets the room up and he's so excited. It's fun to watch him. And he has a really great case study about doing that. So I always say, ask your executive team what they're trying to achieve, and then figure out where social fits into that conversation. Make it a tool to achieve the mission, not a channel that they're scared of.
So we've thrown a lot at you over the past hour, and if I let them, I'm sure Eddie and Nicole could probably talk another 10 hours and have 10 more hours of actionable insights into social media. But I asked them to end this webinar by just providing the one thing they really want you to walk away with. What should the audience walk away with? That one thing they should keep on top of their mind as they go back now into their marketing programs and marketing campaigns and try to use social media to move the needle. So Nicole, what is that one thing for you, that one most key takeaway?
I would say that it's about really presenting business data and to stop presenting social media data and all of this new language that executives don't understand. If you're trying to prove the value of what you're doing, start aligning social media to core business metrics like sales volume, revenue, and cost. You may not be able to get to social media revenue today because it does require an integration into CRM, but the thing you absolutely 100% know today is how much you spend in social. And if you know that and you start to compare things like cost per impression, cost per engagement, and cost per lead in social media across other channels, it'll really open people's eyes about where social media is delivering value.
What about for you, Eddie?
We see kind of a paradigm shift actually occurring in social media where kind of the first kind of V1, if you will, was people thinking about and looking at social media really from just a passive tracking perspective, almost after the fact. What's happening is because there's technologies that have been created to actually parse through like the entire Twitter corpus and to provide instant results on all of those data, you actually can start to now learn from and quantify in real time what and how people are talking about your products and services, and then to bake that intelligence into how you're promoting, what content to produce, even tweaking your own products. And it's a very different way of thinking about how to leverage social media beyond just the passive kind of after-the-fact tracking. And we've got a variety of free tools, just the Topsy.com, that people can check out. But it's just a very different way of thinking about how to leverage the asset of social media.
Well, that one great way to use Topsy. One way I use Topsy is I'll take our blog post and I'll paste the URL into Topsy, and then you can see right away who's tweeting about your blog post, but you can also see they break it down. They have interesting posts about this link, so I can see if someone didn't just hit retweet, but if someone actually said something around our blog post, then you can proactively reach out to those people too. For you guys, it might be a lead. For us, it's more just to start a conversation, or I'm really looking for case studies all the time, so that's kind of my leads. But my top takeaways: every company creates content every day. They just don't always share it. Social media at the end is just really a medium to get quality content to people. And the biggest question I get, the biggest challenge from B2B marketers and marketers of all stripes, is they just don't know where that content will come from. They're not naturally writers, they're not naturally content creators, but your company's producing it anyway. And so some things I do, for example, try to get copied on as many emails as possible. I know it's not fun, but there's good content in there because you'll see, for example, someone in customer service answering a customer question, or someone in sales answering a prospective customer question, and there's usually a blog post right there. Or you see a slide deck that perhaps someone presented to a prospective customer answering some challenges. You could turn that into a white paper. You can turn that into a webinar. Your company and everyone in your company, they're creating that content every day. You just need to peel back the layers, take out whatever you don't want to share, whatever is proprietary, but peel back the layers and share the part that's valuable. So that one interaction between a salesperson and a customer, or a customer service representative and a customer, or whatever it may be, you can share it with the entire universe, get it on Google, get people searching for it, and get people finding your company and getting more leads. Fortunately, that's all the time we have, but I do want to thank Eddie Smith, Chief Revenue Officer of Topsy Labs, Nicole Kelly, the President of SME Digital, for taking your time today. Some real social media thought leaders, and thank you very much for being on the line, guys.
Thank you, Daniel.
And I also want to thank all of you for attending. I know you're very busy in your day. Thank you for taking the time, and please fill out the survey at the end of this webinar and let us know how we can improve these webinars for you. Thank you.